The Pacific Crest Trail is a long-distance trail that spans 2,650 miles across California, Oregon, and Washington, and takes on average 5 months to hike. In 2014, I hiked the PCT northbound, from the border with Mexico to the border with Canada. Before heading out, I prepared 26 resupply boxes for each 100 miles of the trail. Here is all the dried food for my dinners. Calories during the day. One of the essentials, olive oil. So I've got the resupply number on the top, and then the big number is the number of days food that it has. About. My mom and stepdad sent these packages out to towns along the trail as I walked. Usually it would take around 5 days to walk 100 miles, and by then I'd be at the next town where I could pick up my box at the post office. And of course buy anything I needed from stores. I had dreamt about hiking the entire PCT for many years. Here we are at the Mexican border. Bye! Have a good summer! The southern terminus of the Pacific Crest Trail is 2 miles from Campo, a tiny town near the border with Mexico. In this arid land west of the Colorado Desert, there can be long gaps between water sources. I was nervous because I had never backpacked in the desert before, but I was also tremendously excited. "15 miles into the trip, at Lake Marina, there was a kickoff event where prospective hikers and trail veterans could meet to celebrate the history of the trail and the start of a new hiking season. It was a good opportunity to meet fellow thru-hikers and to get last-minute advice from experienced backpackers. Random acts of kindness at the kickoff were also my first glimpse of trail magic and the larger community that surrounds the PCT.
Regardless of what you see online or whatever, and hey, it's hiking cool, it's all part of, no problem. This is serious. It's quite an endeavor that you're doing.
Good evening, everyone! We trust you had a good day with us. Is everybody hungry?
From Lake Marina, the trail departs the Hauser Wilderness, heads up through the Laguna Mountains, then back down into the San Felipe Valley and up into the San Felipe Hills. It became apparent almost immediately that the 700 miles of desert south of the Sierras would not be some stretch of flat, boring hiking, or really homogeneous at all. The land could be both rich and barren, and I never knew what to expect around the next corner. Now that's some desert way out there. Along the first stretch of trail, I struggled to keep my tent from blowing down in the wind at night. I carefully managed my water, sometimes having to carry more than 5 liters to make it to the next source. I have to wonder how much of this different world I'll remember. All these different forms of life, their textures, their colors. This land. As I went, I got better at site selection for my tent, and I also got better at pitching it, which both helped to ensure a good night's rest. By day, the desert still astounded with its colors and landscapes, and I was always surprised how many other hikers there were. I was one in many. Home again, jiggity jig. I'll actually be able to set my tent up here, which is quite nice. Well, at the RV park, I was resting and recovering from a sour 20-plus mile day, but did another 20 today, and I feel quite good, actually. It's hard to describe how magical, or even mythical, certain stretches of the trail can feel at certain times of day. Golden light in the morning, and a pathway beckoning you beyond. Before I knew it, I had completed the first section of the trail, and it was the first repetition of a pattern that became my life for the next 5 months. walking down the road in Warner Springs. Just got my resupply package at the post office. Headed back to the community center, which is a pretty cool place that has showers and laundry and stuff all set up. There used to be a resort here, but it went like bankrupt and all this stuff happened, and now it's just this little place, but it's pretty awesome that the town set it up for PCT hikers. So yeah, nice little first resupply stop. Not enough wind today for the bandit style get up, but man, is it hot. From Warner Springs, the trail takes you gradually up to the first high elevation mountains on your route across the country, the San Jacintos. At the end of this section is the first true trail town, Idlewild. As I got into the groove of desert hiking, I would often hike early in the morning and ride up till or beyond sunset, and take a siesta in the afternoon during the hottest part of the day, usually whenever I managed to make it to a spring with water, where other hikers and I would nap and talk and look up through shade-giving plants while waiting for temperatures to become more comfortable. Then we would start moving again and see how far we could get before another sunset. Through blisters, chafing, sunburn, and dehydration, we all gradually adapted to our new environment and shared in a friendly combination of camaraderie and competition. Sometimes I wished I could have had more distance and isolation, but that would eventually happen as we all spread out more over time.
Here we are at the beautiful Paradise Valley Cafe. Obviously, I'm not the only hiker here.
I decided to climb Mount San Jacinto as I left Idlewild, but there was an unexpected hurdle: a snowstorm.
Not the kind of casual first day out I was planning.
Thankfully, at the very top of the mountain, there was a shelter, which I could weather the storm in, and wake up alone the next morning on top of a 10,000-foot mountain, rising far above the desert. Desert is pretty cool. I'm starting to get used to it. Although, yeah, still have a ways to go, and I'm hearing whisperings of the Mojave, which is much more desert-like indeed.
Miles have gone, and that's how many I have to go.
Coming down from the San Jacintos, the trail drags you through around 8,000 feet of descent, all the way to the flat floor of San Gorgonio Pass, a wind-torn valley mankind has capitalized on. After San Gorgonio Pass, the PCT crosses the San Andreas Fault and winds its way along the San Bernardino Mountains for quite some time. The climb up Mission Creek was long and hot, but rewarded the hard work with rolling flat trail for several miles, changing vegetation, and awesome views. It was one of the first times I truly felt like I was on the crest. As the San Bernardinos wound to a close, I found myself at Big Bear Lake, a good trail town where I stayed in a hostel and picked up a knee brace to help with pain I was experiencing.
There's Big Bear Lake, and where I stayed at the Big Bear Hostel, right directly across the lake from it now.
After a rest day, I continued on past Deep Creek Hot Springs, the Mojave River Forks Dam, Silverwood Lake, and eventually I made it to Cajon Pass at around mile 342. I stayed in a motel there with another thru hiker and watched Star Trek while sitting in bed. I hiked with two other hikers named Godzilla and Pesky to Wrightwood, and then after Wrightwood, we headed out into the San Gabriel Mountains and then through burn zones which had many detours around Poodle Dog Bush, a plant that gives hikers nasty reactions on contact sometimes, that will quickly colonize an area after a wildfire has swept through. After spending the night in some horse stables at the North Fork Saddle Ranger Station at around mile 436, the trail took a breathtaking route down through Soledad Canyon. Starting in the morning, I watched as the Bobcat Canyon cliffs grew closer and closer with each downward step. Getting to the bottom of this valley marked the end of the San Gabriel Mountains on the PCT, and continuing on, the trail goes up scenic brushy hills to give its first tastes of the Vasquez Formation, with strange cliffs of rock cobbled in pink siltstone. The trail winds its way through Vasquez Rocks County Park. From there it was a quick walk to Agua Dulce. After a lovely rest in Agua Dulce, specifically at the Softleys, an incredible trail angel community, I headed back out onto the trail, but I skipped the next trail angel location that most hikers rest at, the Andersons. This meant that I missed some key information, and I ended up walking accidentally through a fire closure while I was trying to escape a storm that was chasing me. After around 33 or 34 miles in a day, I finally made it back to the PCT proper, and rested, miraculously, at an inn. From the inn, the PCT cuts straight north through the middle of Antelope Valley, part of the Mojave Desert, and it follows the Los Angeles Aqueduct. This is a pretty iconic part of the trail, where you're just walking in the sheer open desert, and many hikers do it at night. But I got by just fine doing it in the day, and proceeded on through some of the largest wind farms in the planet. Hiking past the turbines was interesting at first, but just when you think you've seen the last of them, more appear over the next ridge, and it starts to get a little tiring. The trail crosses Willow Spring Road, where I hitchhiked off the trail into the town of Tehachapi, and shortly after that, the trail crosses Highway 58, where the last section of desert begins. Before I left the Alta Wind Energy Center, though, I didn't miss my chance to tilt at windmills. The section from Tehachapi to Kennedy Meadows was one of my favorite parts of the first 750 miles of the trail, not only because of a bubbling anticipation for the Sierras, but also because it offered vistas and challenges that made it feel truly worthy of the term desert. Fairly often in these hot areas, it would make more sense to sleep without a tent set up. People call this cowboy camping, and it gives you more ventilation, lets you see where you are easier, and lets you look up at the stars at night. And when it's warm and dry enough to do, it's pretty great. Some days on the trail are defined by hardship, and others are defined by interactions with other hikers or friendly people in towns. And some days on the trail are lonely, but in their surreal beauty, they cannot be contained or defined, with so many mysteries growing in the sky and carrying you forward with the wind. Sometimes the transitions from one part of the land to another seem almost impossible. And in one way, they are impossible to ever experience in just that way again. The desolate stretch of trail just a few days before the gateway to the Sierras was a dramatic stage for the sand, light, and varied vegetation that makes up the soul of the Southern Californian section of the Pacific Crest Trail. Gosh, this stretch is pretty brutal. My tent did pretty well last night in the wind. Water caches can be a lifeline in this part of the trail, but you never know how much water they'll actually have. Final moments of anticipation. Will these bottles have water in them? Okay, good. There's some. Not much. Wow. There might only be that one. Jeez. Systems described by science intersect and overlap and meet up and tangle. Many small things meeting up and intersecting. Many small things overlapping, interacting, blurring together. Kennedy Meadows South is one of the most anticipated parts of the PCT because it marks the beginning of the Sierra Nevada mountains in California, one of the most attractive backpacking destinations in America. Getting here means you've built up your trail legs and you're fully ready for a dramatic change of scenery. It's a place to celebrate the end of the beginning and the countless adventures that are yet to come. It's a tradition for hikers here to welcome every new arrival with applause. Thank you. Ah, hey. Awesome. One thing I didn't expect with entering the Sierras was that they were shaped so much like a wedge, and that I would be stepping onto the highest part of that wedge all at once. Tumanaguya, or Mount Whitney, is the highest mountain in the lower 48. And it's a side trip from the Pacific Crest Trail that you arrive at only 2 days into the Sierras. The summit of Tumanaguya is certainly an amazing place to soak in the character of the Sierras for the first time. The whole range is so much higher than the Cascades, near where I grew up in Washington, that large trees often only appear in deep valleys. The rugged upper reaches of this range are a vast open expanse of rock, sun, water, snow, and shadow. The PCT and John Muir Trail both overlap old trade routes that Native Americans used for hundreds of years. Numu Paiute elders call the route the Numu Poyo, or People's Trail. The entire Sierra Nevada mountain range, including Tumanaguya, are made up of a granite batholith, a huge collection of magma intrusions that cooled underground and then were later lifted via faults because of an overall stretching of the surrounding area. Backpacking in the Sierras is a significant change of pace from the desert. Each mountain pass takes you up high over 10,000, 11,000, and 12,000 foot passes that drain your energy and slow you down significantly. You can go 16 miles and you'll feel like you've gone about 24 desert miles. One common experience among thru-hikers in the Sierras is hiker hunger. With all the extra energy you're expending, you get extremely hungry, and this causes most hikers to resupply out of Bishop through Kearsarge Pass, which requires going a significant way off the trail, but it's worth it so that you can get more food as you tackle pass after gorgeous pass.
Got some pretty good stuff for dinner here. Couscous with broccoli and red peppers, some lentils in there. Little pitch here, it's not the greatest, but it'll definitely do. There's the moon up there with the ridge. Not too many bugs at all up here either. This is Ray Lake. It's absolutely incredible. Confidence, honestly. Oh, and it looks like the bridge is right at mile 800. This guy's been following me for a while, which probably means somebody fed him human food at some point. Tough stuff. Here's my campsite for the evening. I've got my water filtering from the nearby creek. It's probably the one spot that's decent anywhere nearby. Out with the old and in with the new. 1,000 miles for a pair of shoes is pretty good.
Yeah. Strawberries!
Yeah, for the first time, cheers!
Chupesky is what everyone said.
Chupesky!
Because we love him so. Okay, I had to turn it off before anyone else could comment.
After a good rest in lee vining, the trail coming out of Tuolumne Meadows passed pleasant rivers and carved granite, eventually leading through expansive mosquito-ridden meadows. Leaving these mixed blessings behind, the trail makes one ascent that for me was like an exclamation mark on my experience in the Sierras. It was also one of the best encapsulations of what the Pacific Crest Trail is all about. The astounding experience of getting lost in an endless pace of steady work and reward, only to find yourself suddenly breaking out of all patterns into a singular experience of your own tininess in an immense landscape. It's a connection to something bigger than your own life. I felt this connection suddenly and powerfully, walking up a long path on a naked ridge to Sonora Pass, and I found myself extremely emotional. I woke up the next morning and walked down off of Sonora Pass to the town of Bridgeport, where my father and sister met me and treated me to meals, rests in hot springs, and then hiked up with me a little ways on before leaving me to continue the rest of my journey.
I think I got it. Oh, I may have hit record.
There was something profoundly optimistic about this time, and the way the clouds poured across the landscape seemed to mirror my inevitable path northwards. I could barely contain my excitement at the idea that I still had the length of the trail to walk in front of me all the way to Canada, and I wasn't even in Oregon yet. The sky and life seemed endless. As the trail approaches South Lake Tahoe, a massive lake with one of the biggest towns that's very close to the PCT, it leaves the tough granite peaks of the High Sierras and enters a landscape that gave less resistance to ever-influential glaciers, a drier, volcanic landscape with its own kinds of ridge walking and forest. Walking up to the top of a ridge from the middle of a forest, or back down off of a ridge into the shade of a new valley, transitions come frequently on the trail and wake you up to the diversity and seclusion of countless spaces. There is a lot of peace in the quiet of these places. Peace that makes for a deep kind of content. And there is an often inviting sense of newness and excitement to witnessing a place tilting into the sun or emerging from a bank of clouds. North of Echo Lake the trail enters the Desolation Wilderness. The glaciers here took much of the soils with them, leaving far fewer opportunities for growth. The skeletal kind of forest in this area and the constant presence of sky-reflecting lakes gives it a striking character. When I went through, mosquitoes were at their peak near some of the larger lakes. But for this price, I was rewarded with one of the most impressive sunsets I've ever seen. After resupplying in a small town called Sierra City, I headed out in the evening to beat the heat on the 4th of July. At the top of a ridge, I saw a campfire, and a short walk rewarded me with good company, hot dogs, and a view of distant fireworks to the west. The rest of this section to Belden was a blur of steep ups and downs, usually in a very hot forest, punctuated by the Middle Fork Feather River. Thankfully, there were just enough opportunities to escape the woods and camp on something that was like a ridge, to enjoy the sky. And soon enough I made it to Belden, where I met my dad and took a quick little road trip over to Lassen National Park to see its boiling mud pots and other geothermal activity. The landscape in Northern California can be a lot more subtle, and the conditions can be difficult, with burns and extreme heat in some places, such as Hat Creek Rim, which I woke up to complete long before sunrise.
Starting to get hot out here. Most definitely.
It's official. I've seen a scorpion.
Didn't think I was gonna be dealing with this stuff so much after the High Sierra. Here I am.
But there are certainly rewards too, with the incredible Bernie Falls bursting out of its underground river into wide cascading waterfalls that can drench you in their mist. And then you get distant views of Mount Shasta, which the trail makes a large circle around, so it always stays in the distance, tantalizing. Until you get to Castle Craig State Park, which has geological formations that are over 400 million years old, in what to me felt like an extremely dreamlike atmosphere. Water can be scarce in this area, but there's also almost 100 miles of ridge walking. After the hot up and down forests, a little bit further south, the scenic section was a breath of fresh air. But shortly, the air itself would become a little bit less hospitable. I passed the towns of Castella, Etna, and Sayad Valley, meeting my dad in Etna for another break at a hotel. My dad had just retired, so he was able to meet me at several places along the trail. The night I left Sayad Valley, a lightning storm passed by, just out of earshot, but visible in the distance. Over 2 days, that storm caused 26 fires. For more than 200 miles, the results of fires would have a constant presence on the trail. And this was just one of many storms that struck drought-ridden California, causing a terrible fire year in Oregon and Washington.
The whole air smells like smoke now. It's like a giant, massive barbecue or something. So all day today, or at least for the latter part, the sunlight has been filtered red through the smoke, I believe. So we spent a while looking at the nice big old cloud in the distance, only to walk 20 feet and realize, oh, there's also a fire about one ridge over.
In our backyard.
This massive pyrocumulus cloud appeared to be directly north of us. Thankfully, later we would learn that it was a fire well east of the trail. Nonetheless, it was an intimidating presence.
Crazy pyrocumulus doing what it do. I am about 4.2 miles from Oregon and loaded up with water so I can camp wherever at this point. I'm kind of just hoping to get a view around the corner and make sure there's no wildfire on that side of the ridge.
As I entered Oregon on the Pacific Crest Trail, I felt like I was also starting a race against the fire. I made a brief stop at Hyatt Lake Resort a few miles off the trail, then continued into the Sky Lakes wilderness. Hyatt Lake, like many lakes along the PCT in 2014, was very low. From there, it was a straight shot to Crater Lake.
Pleasant, smooth, surreal, dark. It's Oregon, I guess, for now.
Crater Lake is one of the most meaningful places on the planet to me. It was the destination of a 500-mile section hike I took on the PCT in 2009. Crater Lake is the skeleton of Mount Mazama that exploded around 12,000 years ago, leaving only a massive crater in its wake. This crater is filled with some of the most pristine water you'll ever see, and the depth of its blueness in the sun is astounding. Getting here marked the beginning of an overlap with that trip I had taken in 2009, from White Pass up in Washington down to Crater Lake. I was extremely excited to get to see the trail again, because that month had been one of the most beautiful experiences of my life, and now I could see it going the other direction, as part of a much larger journey.
Been to Wizard Island.
From Crater Lake, you head north to Mount Thielsen, and then into the Diamond Peak Wilderness. Finally getting to Odell Lake, where Shelter Cove Resort acts as a good little resupply and rest stop. But while I was at Shelter Cove, another storm came through and started more fires.
That is one destroyed tree right there.
North of Odell Lake, the PCT winds its way past the Rosary Lakes and Irish Lake towards the Three Sisters Wilderness, resplendent with glaciated peaks, obsidian falls, and massive ancient lava flows. Continuing north out of the Three Sisters Wilderness, the trail heads for more volcanoes. Mount Washington, Three-Fingered Jack, and Mount Jefferson, one of the lovely, lonely, snow-capped mountains of the Cascades.
And there's Three-Fingered Jack.
The trail from Mount Jefferson to Mount Hood is quite long and flat, but at Mount Hood you get to rest at the Timberline Lodge, and then continue on down towards the Columbia River. Most hikers take an alternate route down Eagle Creek. It requires skirting down a very rough, unused trail at first, but once at the bottom of that, the Eagle Creek Trail does not disappoint, heading by and even through towering views of waterfalls. Getting to the Columbia River after Eagle Creek means you're at Cascade Locks, a trail town just before the Bridge of the Gods, the entrance to the final state on the Pacific Crest Trail, Washington.
Slept in a nice marina by the Columbia River. And now it's time to head across the Bridge of the Gods into Washington. Alrighty. Well, it's been a great time in Oregon, and this bridge certainly brings back memories. Good stuff. Back on solid ground.
By the time a PCT thru hiker reaches Washington, they are so used to thru hiking that it's hard to slow them down. By this time, most hikers don't want the hike to end just yet, but they're also thinking about everything they want to do that isn't hiking. Immediately upon hitting Washington, the trail takes on a different character. Passing through some rich, lichen-strewn forests near the Columbia River, you quickly learn that the rolling flat of Oregon is gone for good. Climbing up through all the different ecological zones you'll see in Washington, the trail eventually reaches subalpine forest, leaving views of Mount Hood behind and passing close by Mount Adams, the next volcano in the Cascades chain. The trail passes by Mount Rainier at Highway 410 or Chinook Pass, and I took a day off to spend time there with my dad. And then it was on to Snoqualmie Pass, where I-90 brings most Seattleites out to hike in the Cascades. The days were getting shorter, and time was running out on this adventure. It definitely has a melancholy sense when paired with the turning of the seasons as the nights get colder. But I was also overjoyed at what I had accomplished, and was determined to savor the rest of the trail as deeply as I could. After Stevens Pass, you properly enter the North Cascades, what feels like the final large area of the Pacific Crest Trail, a special wilderness tucked up in the north against Canada. The trail crosses over east into drier parts of the mountains, and this especially gives you a sense of the autumn approaching quickly, with ground cover that's turning red and plants all gone to seed. And soon enough, not quite sure how to feel about it at the time, I found myself at Hopkins Lake, just a few miles from the northern terminus.
And there's Hopkins Lake, final campsite on my 2014 through hike.
It was time to go home, and I was ready.
Well, that's southern Germany.
2,660 miles.
There's Juneau.
Do you have an apple in there?
There's a lighthouse.
Champagne?
Oh, sure. Sure. I'll take some champagne, thank you.
And that's what the trail does to you. It turns you from a banana into whiskey, or what is it? Bourbon.
Head brow down. Yep. Perfect.
Nice one.
Thanks.
No way.
Camera now.
Oh, there's hopscotch.
You just gotta get it on there, come on. Straight though, close enough.
It's a little bit crooked.
I
Why not?
wonder how many people have tried to do this.
Baggage. trying to fix the monument.
Wrong.
Yeah, it's like, huh. Yeah. It's the car that has come to save me from this wonderful Canadian weather that we're having.
It's autumn, Keegan.
Take me back to precious, precious Seattle, full of beer and beds.
Oh yeah.
And Dark Souls and pizza and sleeping.